Hello, Year 11. Welcome to the Introduction to Politics session for your induction day to Newstead Wood Sixth Form. My name, for those of you who don't know me, is Miss Young, and I'm the Head of Politics. Also teaching politics next year will be, as you can see on the slide in front of you, Mr. Bornat. So Mr. Bornat teaches politics, RPE, and he's also the Head of Sixth Form, so you'll have already had some contact with him anyway. And as I said, I'm the Head of Politics and I also teach history, so some of you may very well have me for 4 lessons a week instead of just 2. We also have our student subject leaders in politics, and they are students who are currently in Year 12 who are there to help you if you get stuck or you have any questions, or if you perhaps miss a lesson and you need to do a little bit of catch up at some point next year. And they also do a lot of help me with a lot of organisation of our politics events in schools, like the mock election, International Women's Day, that type of thing. So the 2 subject leaders are Rachel and Caitlin, and the deputies are Noah, Zara and Alice. So I thought it would be helpful for me to run through a course overview for you, just so that you're aware exactly of what's going to be coming up. So the politics course is 3 components. They're all equally weighted. Component 1, which you will study in the autumn term of Year 12, is about UK politics, and you do 4 units for that: democracy and participation, electoral systems, political parties, and voting behaviour and the media. In the summer term of Year 12, you'll also do the 3 core political ideas as part of Component 1, which are conservatism, liberalism and socialism. Component 2, which is about UK government, we study in the spring term of Year 12. And again, there are 4 subtopics to that: constitution, parliament, prime minister and executive, and relationships between institutions. And there is 1 non-core political ideology for that component 2, and that is feminism. The final component is component 3, and that's comparative politics of the USA, and we study that in Year 13. And some of the different components of that will be constitution and federalism, studying US Congress and the US Supreme Court, democracy and participation, and civil rights. Now, obviously, at this point in time, I'm a little unsure as to what's going to be happening with trips, because we're a little unsure as to what the government advice will be. However, my intention would be at some point in your 2-year course to take you to the politics conference, which is held at Westminster Hall near the Houses of Parliament, usually at the beginning of December. And what that involves is several key and very up-to-date and current politicians come and talk and give speeches, and they will also take questions from students on any topic you want to ask. So over the last few years, John Bercow has spoken, William Hague, Jess Phillips, Nigel Farage, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Chuka Umunna, Keir Starmer spoke. So there's lots of really, really interesting people. So I'm hoping we'll get to do that. And the second day trip will be to visit Parliament and the Supreme Court. We do also, in theory, run a big trip to New York and Washington, DC, when we're to coincide with the study of our American politics option. However, at the moment, I can't guarantee that that's going to go ahead, but if it was, it would be for you guys in the February half term of 2022. In terms of assessment, there are 3 components to the course, 3 exams. There is no coursework, 1 for each unit. They're all 2 hours each, and they're all worth 33.3% of the A-level, so they're all equally weighted. In order to prepare for September, now some of you may very well have bought this textbook already. If you have, that's great. If you haven't, don't panic. It's available on Amazon. It's the edXL AS A-Level Politics textbook. It is a bit of a monster. I'll be really honest with you, it's about this thick. However, it does cover you for the whole course, so there's no need for you to go out and buy another one. I did issue you with a reading list in the bridging unit work that you should have received. And the other sort of logistical kind of things you'll need for September, you'll need a folder and a file divider, you know, go buy yourself some new highlighter pens, that type of thing. And the other thing, in terms of preparing for September, please read a good quality newspaper, and listen to a good quality news programme. Something where they're actually talking about the stories in depth, not just the headlines. Okay, so I would suggest something like the Today programme on Radio 4, or PM on Radio 4, which is on in the afternoon, Channel 4 News at 7 o'clock in the evening, something where they're really getting under the skin of some of the news stories. So the second part of today's session, I thought it'd be a really good idea to get us all thinking about what is politics, because you've all opted to study politics, and some of you may have a good idea about what that involves. Some of you might not. You might just have thought, actually, you know what, that sounds quite interesting. I'm going to give that a go. So politics, there's many definitions of what politics is. So Andrew Hayward, he says, Andrew Hayward is one of the chief examiners, so he's an important person for us to listen to. But he says politics, in its broadest sense, is the activity through which people make, preserve, and amend the general rules under which they live. Harvey Mansfield, who's a professor of political philosophy at the University of Harvard in America, says, politics means taking sides. It is partisan. Not only are there sides, typically liberal and conservative in our day, but also they argue against each other, so that it is liberals versus conservatives. Some other definitions of politics are that it is the art of government. It's to do with public affairs. It's about compromise and consensus, or it's about the control and distribution of resources. So where might you see politics in action at school? Imagine, if you will, for a second, that Mr. Blount, the head teacher, and Mr. Bornat, head of sixth form, have given the new Year 12 students free rein to decide on a new set of rules for Newstead Wood sixth form. What rights do you think sixth formers at Newstead Wood should have? I'd like you now to take 5 minutes to brainstorm all of the things you think a sixth former should be entitled to. And when you've made your list, go on to the next slide. So I would suggest you pause this recording now for 5 minutes and then move on. I would imagine that, having made your list, you've probably come up with a variety of different things, such as the right to freedom of expression, which may or may not include everything from wearing a uniform to having a say in decisions about how the school is run. You may have said that one of your rights is to get a good education, that teachers should arrive promptly for lessons, set you challenging work, and mark and return it in a timely fashion. You may have said that you believe you have a right to take part in extracurricular activities, such as sport, drama, or music, because you have a right to live your very best life, becoming the very best that you can be. Or you might have gone for some less serious examples that I've had in the past when I've had this discussion with potential Year 12s, such as the right to have lunch at any time, not to have to queue with the greenies lower down the school, or not to have to ask to go to the toilet. We all value different things, so the chances are your examples will not be identical to each other. If we were in the lesson together, we could, of course, discuss those. Unfortunately, that is not possible today. However, it is likely that you have all come up with a list, and we are at least agreed on the fact that sixth formers have rights, just as we all have rights as a member of society. But with rights come responsibilities. In society, we can't just go around doing whatever we want because we believe we have a right to do so. That way would lead to chaos. We agree that there are certain ways that we should behave. Thomas Hobbes and Jean-Jacques Rousseau called this the social contract. They said that individuals surrender, either explicitly or tacitly, some of their freedom in exchange for the protection of their rights and social order. And we therefore accept that government, or in this example we're talking about, the governing body of our school, have a legitimate authority to tell us what to do. So alongside our rights as members of society, we also have to agree to uphold certain responsibilities. For example, to obey the law or to pay our taxes. So what are the responsibilities of a Newstead Wood sixth former? I'd like you now to take another 5 minutes, and please pause the video in doing so, to brainstorm the things you think are the responsibilities of Newstead Wood sixth formers. And once you've made your list, please go on to the next slide. The responsibilities list might have been a little bit harder to compile. You may have said that one of your responsibilities is to arrive at school on time, to attend your lessons. That's what we might call a tacit contract you have with your teachers. You turn up, they teach you. You might have decided that one of your responsibilities was to wear your uniform or to act as a role model to those lower down the school. These are the things we expect Newstead Wood sixth formers to do as members of our community. And in exchange, we promise to provide you with a safe, secure environment in which to access a top-level education that includes both academic and non-academic opportunities. But what if the social contract is broken? If you choose not to obey the school rules, what happens? You might get a detention or an exclusion. You might even, depending on the severity to which you don't obey, you might even get expelled. What would happen in wider society if you chose not to obey the rules? You might end up getting into trouble with the police, or you could end up going to prison. But what if it was the government or your school who were not upholding their end of the bargain? What if the government was not protecting your freedom of expression? What if your school was failing to provide you with an education at a level you deem to be appropriate? You would have a right to resist. But how would you do that? You could withdraw your consent, which may be done in a variety of ways, both legal and non-legal. At school, you could refuse to attend, you could refuse to come to school, or you could write to the head teacher or the chair of governors. If that doesn't work, you could write to the local authority or your MP. You could organise protests or petitions demanding change. All of these things could also be done on a wider scale if you felt that the government was not abiding by the terms of the social contract. You could go on strike from your job. You could protest or petition for change. You could demand your MP take action on your behalf, or you could vote for someone else at the next general election. Or, as we've seen throughout history, you could use violent means, such as civil disorder or rioting. The problem is, we don't all agree. What may constitute a valid reason to me to break the social contract might not be a valid reason to any of you. So how do we solve this dilemma? We engage in politics, the social science of compromise. If we'd been in school today in person, I would have asked you all in groups to decide definitively on 5 rights and 5 responsibilities you think were applicable to Newstead Wood sixth formers, and you would have all had to agree on them as part of that exercise. In order to come to a conclusion, you would have had to debate and compromise. One of you may have said something like, I think X is really important, but I guess I would also support Y. And another might have said, yeah, I agree, Y is quite important, although for me, Z is my red line, that has to happen. So you come down somewhere in the middle, either opting for Y or coming up with an alternative, XZ kind of compromise. It's not easy, and most of the time, most people don't get everything that they want. But in the end, we hope to agree on something we can all live with. Of course, if you don't fancy any of that compromise malarkey, you could go down the historical dictator route, which, although less popular, is a lot more efficient. So where do we go from here? You need to engage in political debate. Over the last few weeks, we've seen protests in support of the death of George Floyd in America, which have spread around the globe. There has been all sorts of discussion and debate on social media about this case and about racism today in 2020 and how we should be engaging and challenging those ideas. I would encourage you really strongly to read some political texts. As I said, I've sent you a reading list about that you can start to access. Or if you're a little unsure, please feel free to email me directly and I can make some recommendations for you. And please come to the lesson in September with some opinions. I promise you, I won't hold you to them if you change your mind, but you need to have some ideas about what you think about certain key issues that are happening. Have a think when you watch the news this week, what do we mean by politics? And think about the process. Politics is about negotiation and compromise, and see how often you can identify it this week when you watch the news. So with that in mind, Year 11, thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the session. It's given you a little introduction to some of the types of issues and processes we'll be studying in September. I look forward to meeting you all, those of you who will be joining us from other schools, and also those of you returning from Newstead. I look forward to seeing you all in September, and I hope you have a really nice summer break. Thanks very much. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.